Good evening. I'm Ed Selich, Vice President of Speak Up Newport. Welcome to our July program. We're going to have a good program for you this evening. Speak Up Newport, it's a community group of interested residents that put on monthly programs of community interest, and also we sponsor the annual Mayor's Dinner, and also we give out annual scholarships to our local high schools. So tonight, before we start the program, we'd like to introduce you to our scholarship winners this year, and I'd like to bring up our scholarship committee, Kay Walker.
Thank you, Ed. This year, scholarships were very difficult to choose because so many applications were received, and the stories that we hear and the good things that the students at both of our high schools are doing is remarkable. So we had a really tough time choosing this year, but as always, we chose 2 from Newport Harbor High School and 2 from Corona Del Mar High School. So I'm going to start with Kevin Castaneda. Kevin, come on up, please. Kevin is a graduate of Newport Harbor High School, and he's going to be going to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo this fall. Just stay right here, honey. We're going to take a picture. Oh, measuring in? Business administration. Okay. Julia Gregory is next. She's also from Newport Harbor High School, and she will be going to the University of Southern California. Majoring in? Communications. Excellent. Annika Bassi is from Corona Del Mar High School. She'll be attending Harvard come fall. And I believe, and you're going to be majoring in? I think biology. Perfect. And last but not least is Ryan Murphy. Ryan is also a graduate from Corona Del Mar High School, and he will be attending Loyola Marymount. And your major will be? With a career in? So we have 2 future doctors on our hands, so watch out. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. Just as a reminder, when you attend the Mayor's Dinner, we have a raffle for the centerpiece for the tables at each table, and so that money it's part of the money that goes towards the scholarship program. So we're very proud that we can offer these scholarships, and certainly we have 4 fine students and future leaders in our community. So congratulations to all of you. Okay, so now we'll get started with our main program. Our sheriff is here to give us the update on what's going on in the county, and to introduce her is board member Rush Hill.
So before I do that, I have to tell you that I had the privilege of being the commencement speaker at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo several years ago. And at that time, I had a sophomore enrolled there. I had a freshman enrolled in SC, and had a senior enrolled in SC. And so a comment I made during the presentation was, at least I had one in an academic institution. It was the only thing that made the press the next day. And my kids have hated me ever since. We do have an exciting evening tonight for you. We have an individual that in 2008, in June, was sworn in as our sheriff coroner, the very first female to hold that office, and an individual that has excelled in every aspect in keeping our quality of life and protecting all of us in Orange County. The Sheriff's Office has got 3,800 individuals, males and females, that are reporting to the sheriff, and makes up a city in itself of all of its responsibilities. It protects over 700,000 individuals in our community under direct supervision. It is licensed or chartered or contracted with 13 cities. It takes care of our airport, 3 harbors, 5 prisons that we have. We're the 8th largest, is it, in the nation, prison system. And all of this has been masterfully run by the individual we have here tonight, Sheriff Sandra Hutchens. So I'm very pleased to call her to the dais. I think that you'll hear an interesting story. Certainly, she has proven to be one of the most qualified individuals to hold that office in Orange County. Sheriff Hutchens.
Thank you, Rush, for that kind introduction. And everybody hear me okay? Thank you for the invitation to be here with you tonight. I know some of you had heard me speak before, so I'm always hesitant to go through my whole background, but I'll just say briefly, I began my career in 1976 as a secretary with the LA County Sheriff's Department, became a deputy in 1978 there, and worked virtually every aspect of the department, promoting up through the rank of division chief, where I was in charge of Homeland Security, gangs, our Air Bureau, our SWAT team. I like to say I had all the toys and I had the best chief job there in the county. I retired in 2007, and I think it was I failed retirement was what I tell everybody. I went back to work. It was my husband's idea at the time. If you remember, Orange County was the Orange County Sheriff's Department was a bit adrift. We had some issues with the sheriff and some of the management team. I always put it that way because I think the vast majority of the men and women of the department tried to ride that out and continue to try and do their job to the utmost, with the utmost integrity. It was a very difficult time. For some reason, I decided to come in and try to fix it. I'm an optimist. I am an eternal optimist. I just believe that you can do anything if you put your mind to it. I felt like I had the experience to come in and make the changes because I'd worked for a large sheriff's department, and Orange County is a large sheriff's department. You heard that we have the 8th largest jail. In many jurisdictions, the sheriff, the only responsibility a sheriff has, some places in the nation, is the jail. And it is our primary responsibility. We have all the other things that you heard about, the contract policing, bomb squad, harbor patrol, our transportation system by contract. We provide security in the courts by contract. So we have a lot of responsibilities, but probably none as I guess, risk-laden than working or having responsibility for over 6,000 individuals who are in our custody. And today, when I began in law enforcement, the county jail was comprised largely of probably 80% misdemeanors, 20% felons. You can flip that today. We have 80% felons and 20% misdemeanors. So it's a very challenging population. We have people who are involved in gangs that have to be separated. We have people that are mentally ill that have to be separated. We have people that are physically ill. We have dangerous individuals who we have to keep separate because they will harm others. So it's a very dynamic environment, and it's the first position that a deputy sheriff goes to work. So it's a great training ground on how to deal with people who really don't want to be there and aren't used to listening to orders or following instructions very well, to say the least. So I'm very proud of the men and women who work in our jails. It is a very important assignment. Then they go out to patrol, and as you heard, we patrol 13 cities by contract and all the unincorporated area in the county. So it's a busy department, but I have a lot of people that work for me that I have a lot of faith and trust in. I get so many accolades about things that they have done in the communities, and I've just got to tell you, it's so important. Public safety, for me, everything I see is through the lens of public safety. So I know Orange County has enjoyed a very safe community, and I want that to continue. That's always been my goal. That is the goal of every police chief in this county, and we just met today. We, every month, both I and all the police chiefs in the county get together for meetings. I tell you that because I want you to know in Newport Beach you have your own police department, you have your own police chief, but I want you to know that we all work very closely together, collaboratively, because problems don't exist in a vacuum. It's like the homeless issue. When we're talking about topical issues right now, homelessness is a huge issue for the entire county. And we were talking about solutions today at our meeting, and we've had a number of initiatives in the county to deal with this problem. But to deal with it, you first have to understand that it is not just the Santa Ana and the riverbed. It is not just Anaheim. It's not just the city of Orange. It's not just Dana Point, where I live, which has a homeless problem. It's a county-wide problem. And a lot of people have described it very aptly as a balloon. You push here and do enforcement here, and you clean up this area here, it'll go to another area. And driving over here, I was driving down next to the shopping center, and there were two homeless individuals on the corner, and they both had their signs up asking for money. The homeless issue is not just about people who are lost their job, got kicked out of their apartment, and have no place to live. Those are some, but those are the easy ones to help. We offer help. There's many organizations in the county, many organizations that get those people off the street. Veterans. We can very easily get veterans off the street because there is a lot of money to help veterans, and there's a lot of focus on helping our veterans. The challenge are the mentally ill and the drug addicted, some of which sometimes cross over, and the people who are, we say, resistant to services. I can tell you from our experience on the riverbed, where we had a large population, virtually a city. When we first went in there and started to talk to people, we were told, you'll have to talk to the mayor. They had their own mayor. And it was really kind of a interesting, okay, fine, we'll talk to the mayor. So we began walking through there, law enforcement, healthcare agency, social services, independent organizations, and offering help first. Offering help, offering assistance, getting their compliance to do that. And number two, if you're not going to take the assistance, you have to get off the riverbed. Because here's the reality. It's somewhat of a strength in numbers. And once you get a group of individuals who are homeless, they start to bring other individuals, because there's comfort in that, in being with people. They're just like us. They don't want to be alone. And so you've got to kind of try and work your way through that. There were children on the riverbed. It was not a safe environment. Health-wise, there were predators, there were drug dealers. A lot of the people who we used to arrest for possession of drugs, who now we give a citation to, are part of that population. I know we've got fire here, and I know when they go out on their calls, they see the same things that I'm talking about. So I don't think we'll ever eliminate homelessness per se, but I can tell you that this county is in a good place because we are working together on it. It's not, I want to make very clear, it's not a law enforcement issue. When I'd go to public forums, they would say, Sheriff, what are you going to do about the homeless population? Well, it's much more complex than that, and I see a lot of heads nodding here. It's very complex. I can't arrest someone for being homeless. Could I arrest someone who's homeless and has a warrant? Yeah, I could probably take them off the street for about an hour or two. Does that solve the problem? No. We were talking about that today. North County has a task force, And they were encountering individuals, and they ran them. They saw they had warrants. They didn't take them to jail for a warrant. They got them into care, which is a more long-term solution. Will everybody stay in the care? No. But in my opinion, we've got to continue to work together as a county on this issue and all own the problem. We're certainly not the only county that's grappling with it, but I think we're doing a darn good job in addressing the problem now. It took some time, but we're all standing shoulder to shoulder, and hopefully we'll have an impact for everyone. Sanctuary cities. I think that's a big misunderstood term. I think everybody has a different definition in mind when you talk about sanctuary. I know the church has a different definition when you talk about sanctuary. Sanctuary cities kind of gets people confused. So SB 54, Senate Bill 54, was passed by the state legislature. It was sponsored by Senator Kevin De Leon, and it had many forms. But the first form was that law enforcement could not talk to any official from ICE. We couldn't talk about anybody who ICE might be looking for. We couldn't have any communication. They couldn't be in our facilities. And so we worked through the language of it. We got some concessions. I still wasn't happy with it at the end. But you'll see sometimes we'll have protesters and they'll say, well, Sheriff, you're not supporting people here who are just trying to have a living. They're coming from other countries. And that's not what SB 54 is about. What SB 54 is about is people who have committed crimes that are here from other countries. And so they are people that are already on ICE's radar, and so they have detainers, they call them detainers on them, so sometimes they end up in our custody. And so what we did prior to SB 54 is we would be able to tell ICE, we've got this person in our custody, they're gonna get released on this date. And ICE would come to our facility and pick them up, and they go through deportation proceedings. It's not like they just get sent wherever. They go through deportation proceedings. What happens now? There's still some offenses, very serious offenses, that I can notify ICE and say, this person's getting out for murder. I know he's on your list. We're going to release him at this date, and they come and pick them up at the jail facility. However, there are others that I cannot let ICE know about. And I just wanted to give you an example of who some of those people are. We put this out this year, earlier this month, to kind of explain what the problem is. From January 1st of this year to May 31st, 414 individuals with ICE detainers were released from our jail without notifying ICE because they didn't rise to that level where we can notify ICE. 45 of the 414 were rearrested for a variety of crimes, including drug charges, driving under the influence, theft, child abduction for sex crimes, spousal battery, assault with a deadly weapon, and attempted murder. They prey on the very immigrant communities that some of the advocates say they're there to protect. I've been out and I've been talking to many of the individuals in the immigrant communities and explaining my stance on this. This is about criminals. And I get a lot of head nods there because you know what? They don't want to be preyed on either. They just want to go to work, do their job, and support their family. One of the problems I had, may surprise you, but sometimes people in Sacramento aren't always very straight talking about what they're really doing. This was presented as a way, this bill, to prevent local law enforcement from just arresting people from being here undocumented. We've never done that. When we stop someone, we don't ask your immigration status. We're not in the immigration business. But that created a fear in the community, and it helped get this bill passed. And it was false. It was false information. So now I spend a lot of time, like I say, going out and explaining that. I've been working with the Catholic Church and meeting with the Hispanic councils and explaining what this really means. That we're not, nobody, not one law enforcement agency in this county will stop anybody and ask, what's your immigration status? That's not what we do. We want them to report crimes. We want them to be good witnesses. We want their communities, where they live, to be safe as well, and that's what this is all about. So, I also have, there's been some discussion about, since we've had this issue on the border and parents being separated from their children. I have a contract with ICE, and they have about 900 detainees that spend time in my jail while they're going through deportation proceedings. Now, they pay the Sheriff's Department to house them there. And there's been some discussion in some of the counties now about should the sheriffs have these contracts with ICE. And these are people that I talked about, the people that were released that reoffended or had a detainer on them because they've committed one or more crimes, serious crimes, and now they're going through deportation proceedings. It has nothing to do with what happened on the border, has nothing to do with people just coming here undocumented. It has to do with people who have come here undocumented and committed a crime. So those are the individuals that we hold. If we did not, if we said we're not going to do that, like Sacramento has done, and most recently Contra Costa County has canceled their contract with ICE, ICE will take those individuals out of state because they don't have capacity here. And those detainees who are kept separate from the inmates, because they're detainees, they're not treated like inmates, but they are held. They have visitors. They have family that comes to see them. So I think it makes sense to keep them in the community where they're at, and it saves taxpayer money because it costs to send them out of state, and it also takes them farther away from their family and connection to the community that they have. So I wanted to explain that. I was asked to talk about what what I was proudest of, or what my biggest successes were. And I have to say, I had some real doubts whether or not I could get elected as a female. I really did. I thought, I don't look like a sheriff, right? Because when you close your eyes and you picture a sheriff, you probably don't see me. And I can tell you, when I came on to LA County Sheriffs, if you would have told me then that someday you're going to be a sheriff, I probably would ask you to get a psychological evaluation, because I never thought I'd even become a sergeant. It was new. Women in law enforcement was new at that time, and I still got double takes when I was driving around in a patrol car by myself. I was like, "Are you really out here by yourself?" And my brother told a story. He's my younger brother, and he came on the Sheriff's Department in Los Angeles, and he's just getting ready to retire. And he told a story. When I was a deputy at Linwood Station, which is right next to Watts, pretty challenging area, pretty high crime area at the time. Women, we had one-person cars, and you would ride out there by yourself, like I said. But there was an area where there was a two-person car that would become available every so often when there wasn't training going on. And so I asked to work with another female deputy. And guess what the answer was? We can't have that. So I'm a logical person. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I can work by myself, she can work by herself, but we can't get in the same car and work together. And the sergeant looked at me kind of puzzled and said, well, I think it's in the manual that you can't work together. Well, I'm stubborn, so I went and looked it up in the manual. Of course, there's nothing in there that says two female deputies cannot work together. So then I got kicked up to the lieutenant. And the lieutenant said, I don't think the sheriff would like it. So in my naivete, I wrote a letter to the sheriff thinking he would get it. It was Sherman Block. Peter J. Pitches was the sheriff when I first came on. Sherman Block was the sheriff. It never left the station. They put 6 copies in my personnel file, thinking that would hurt my career somehow. But at the end of the day, we rode together. So my brother tells me, last night I had dinner with him, and he said, you know, every time I see two women get into a car, I say, little girls, do you think you can really ride together by yourselves? And then they get a little angry, and then he says, look, no. And he tells the story. Incremental change is what it's about. So I took a leap when there was an opening, when the Board of Supervisors hired a search firm. If you recall, they had to select a new sheriff because there was 2.5 years left on his term, and they didn't want to call for a new election and the cost of doing that. I didn't know a single member of the Board of Supervisors. I knew it was a long shot, but I put my name in with the search firm, and I didn't tell anybody else. And nobody really knew who I was. Paper didn't talk about me much till it got closer, and the list kept getting whittled down. And I got selected on a 3-2 vote. 3 people decided that I was going to be sheriff in a county of 3.1 million people. So I really didn't have an electoral mandate, per se. So I would say all of that to say my most proudest moment, I think, was when I got elected, when you voted for me. Because I'd been on the job then for a little over a year, and I felt so proud that you trusted me to be sheriff, because that's what it takes, is trust. Law enforcement has a lot of power. And so you trusted me to do what I said I was going to do. It hasn't been a perfect ride, but law enforcement never is. You have people running around with guns who are stopping people in the street, and you have deputy sheriffs and officers in this county, and this is a plug for law enforcement. Please tell them you're thankful for the job they do, because it's a tough job right now. Right now, with the mentally ill problems, with the homeless problem, drug addiction, you don't know what you're going to find when you get that call. And the call is not always what it sounds like when you first get it. And sometimes you arrive at chaos. People screaming, people yelling, people arguing, sometimes somebody bleeding. And you have to make a quick decision on what to do. But I have to tell you, I go to every graduation that we have, and we have departments from LA County that come to our academy, maybe agencies in this county, and the men and women that are coming into this profession are the best. They're top quality, and they still come. And sometimes I worry, are they still going to come? Because there's been a lot of criticism about law enforcement. But I would ask you to consider the things that they are faced with today. Probably no worse than years ago, but different. They have a lot more tools at their disposal than they used to, but they have a lot of challenges, and we don't always get it right. When we get it wrong, it's very public, and it's usually very disastrous. But we've got to remember, under those uniforms, they're still just people like you and I. And I try and remind the community of that. But what doesn't get told sometimes in the media are all those good stories that I hear all the time. I even got a letter from an inmate in our custody. And he said, you know, I notice there's a change here. Your deputies are much nicer. And they're treating me very well. So thank you. The lady that does my hair, she's had a daughter, a sister, and a brother, all in my custody. Sad. Drug. One armed robbery. But I always ask her, when you go visit them, how is it? And she always says, you know what? They treat me very nice. They don't know that she knows me. She doesn't tell them that. But I always ask how you get treated when you go to visit, because we all have somebody, including me, you always have somebody in your family that makes the wrong choices. I had a cousin who spent a lot of time in and out of jail with a drug problem. And I thought about my aunt when she would have to go down to visit him. It wasn't her fault that he had a drug problem. So I meet a lot of the parents and the families and the spouses that go visit. And we're not there to judge them. You know, we're there to make sure that they're there for their court date and that they receive medical care, and we try and get it along as best we can and do the best job that we can. So the other piece that I'm proud of is culture change. It's hard to change a culture. And someone asked me, when do you know you change the culture? And it's when they start to say the words that you've been saying for years, and now it's coming out of their mouth as if it were their idea. Right? I get some head nods. There's some people that recognize it. And it's as if it's their idea, and that is the goal. And the third, to make myself irrelevant. And I think I've done that. And you do that by bringing people up and preparing them to take over. And I really just my wish is that the Orange County Sheriff's Department does not stay the same department it is, that it grows and gets better. And the next sheriff, who I hope is my undersheriff, who I've endorsed, Don Barnes, that the next sheriff will take it to the next level. Because law enforcement is always changing, community expectations are always changing, and we work for you. And we never can forget that, and we can only work for you if you trust us. And so we always want to maintain that trust. And I don't know if anybody's read James Comey's book. It's a little controversial out there, the former FBI director. But one of the things he said in his book had nothing to do with politics. It had to do with the FBI. And he said, you know what, when you go out, and this applies to law enforcement, to local law enforcement as well, you build a reservoir of trust with the community by doing the right thing, by standing up when you do something wrong, and being as transparent as you can. So that when something bad happens, when something really bad happens, they'll forgive you as long as you fix it and you move on. So, but you have to have that reservoir of trust, and I hope we have that with you. So thank you. I'll open it up to questions. Yes, sir.
I wonder what your feelings are coming from some of our elected officials. I'll repeat that. I wonder what your feelings are with some of the elected officials that are pushing to remove and eliminate ICE.
Stunned. I don't, it's funny. It's not funny. I don't think they understand what ICE is. Customs and Border Protection secures our border. Immigration and Custom Enforcement handles removal and also handles, a lot of people don't know this, Homeland Security investigations, transnational crime, including child pornography, sex exploitation. So the people that are making that, I think it's the politically, for them, the politically correct thing to say at the time, but it couldn't be more wrong. And I just saw one of the assistant directors from ICE today, and they are devastated. They are really downtrodden. They're just trying to do their job. And so I think people are taking advantage of the political. Nobody wants to see a 5-year-old separated from their mother. That breaks my heart. But to say that you want to abolish an entire agency that has a very important mission to do, I would ask the politicians that are calling for that to look up what the mission of ICE is, and do we really want to just open our borders and have anybody come into this country for any reason? I can't think of another country that does that.
Thank you for your comments. You have had a good chance to reflect on the sanctuary law and the sanctuary state. If you were able to make changes that would make it more palatable to all, what would you do?
Again, I see it through a public safety perspective. I don't think we shield criminals. I don't think we shield people who have committed crimes, whether they're citizens or not. I don't think we should shield people who commit crimes. I think we should do everything we can at the local level to assist ICE in getting those folks before a deportation hearing. It creates a bigger public menace, when we release them, I can't notify ICE. I release them to the street. Then ICE goes out and does raids. They do search warrants. And when they go out and do search warrants and they find someone who is just here undocumented, they can pick, and they take them too. So I don't know how that is better or how that is safer for anybody. So that piece of that is SB 54. Prior to SB 54, I had people working, my deputies, I had 4 deputies who were cross-trained as ICE agents, meaning they worked for me, but when someone came into our facility and they put on their booking form that they were not a citizen or they were from another country, they could check ICE database, they could notify ICE. Can't do that now. And after 9/11, one of the things that we all did, all the law enforcement, prior to 9/11, we really didn't talk to each other that much. You wouldn't see local law enforcement talk to FBI or ATF or DEA, not much. Even, the neighboring law enforcement agency. After 9/11, we decided that wasn't a good idea. We're better, we're stronger, we're better together. And so we've been working with our state and federal partners. Well, this legislation says, no, we don't want you to work with that one. I don't think that's right. So that's what I would change about it.
Any further questions?
Yes. I have a brother that's mentally ill, and he's been in the IRC, right, since January. You mentioned, I think, the flip-flop, 20% now of your inmates have committed misdemeanors. And I'm suspecting that a high percentage of them are mentally ill. I know some people feel maybe it's drugs, but my brother has not taken any drugs. He's far from a substance abuser. He is a person with mental illness, and he commits very small misdemeanor, unreasonable interference with the business, yelling in front of a restaurant, right? And he's in this limbo land where he's been found mentally incompetent to stand trial. And I think there's a lot of people on misdemeanors that are mentally ill that don't have a serious enough crime, a felon, and they don't end up in a state hospital, or they just seem to end up in limbo land, and there just don't seem to be enough resources directed at these people, such as my brother, to really get them in housing with wraparound aid. And I think a lot of the homeless people, in my view, I know we might disagree, is that they are mentally ill. And if there was 4,000 beds at Fairview Development Center that were created for permanent housing with wraparound aid, we could really reduce that inmate population. Jailers, are they on 12-hour shifts? I think they're on pretty long shifts.
Yes.
They don't perhaps have any kind of training
They
to
do.
deal with mentally ill.
No, they do have training to deal with the
That's
mentally
great.
ill, but the jail, I would agree with you, is not the place for mentally ill. The problem is, years ago, if you recall, we decided we were not going to have people in state mental institutions, and we were going to have the locals, local counties, local government handle mental health facilities, and that just didn't work out too well. We don't have those mental health facilities. So the default is jail, and that's not the right default. Now, I don't know if I know about your brother, but mentally incompetent to stand trial, I agree with you. The state provides very few beds for that, and we have looked for options to do that, because sometimes that takes a long time to go through the court process. And I would agree with you, they don't belong in our custody for that period of time. But there's no other, currently today, there's no other alternative. So I can't just say, hey, I've decided to let you out. That's a judge's decision. So it's the jails became the default mental institutions in this state, which is a challenge for every law enforcement agency, or every sheriff, I should say, because we're responsible for the jails. I would welcome us having other facilities. I think that would help us with our homeless problem too. And I think we have to take a look at perhaps being able to keep someone beyond a 72-hour hold, because right now you can keep them 72-hour hold. I talk to families they go, oh, at least I knew they were safe during that time. Now they're back out on the street. But currently the law does not allow us to do that, as, you know, does not allow a hospital or me to keep someone beyond that time. I hope that answered.
Any more questions? I would follow up with one other thing and say this is my comparison what I raised, is that I think for first-time visitors who are at the IRC and jail, there was, it sounds kind of silly, some kind of orientation program, because people are just totally unprepared, that you can only meet during a certain time, you can only do certain things, and people like you, just totally caught off guard, totally unprepared, with a facility, and perhaps the performance of our service in that context. I think there could be a better way to do at least with new visitors to jail, so that they're encouraged to visit the inmates. My brother, one of our good public defenders, is so glad my brother and my other brother are visiting. The visits are really important.
They are.
Encouraged and made as easy as they could be.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sandra, thank you.
Thank you. Let me get this on. Thank you.
Quite a job. Very impressive results. I don't know if everyone here is aware that the Newport Beach Police Department has a Citizens Academy that takes place twice a year. It's free of charge. It's the commitment of 11 or 12 evenings. I think it's like on a Thursday evening from 6 to 10. And you go through every aspect of policing. And that's from radar control to shooting the weapons to police dogs to dispatch to the recruiting process, the detective process, all of it. And I think the more citizens that can go through that kind of a program, the better they understand the difficulties and the challenges that our police departments have. And we're very fortunate to have the top and the best in Newport Beach and the top leadership in the county. And so we thank you. We thank you for your efforts and keeping us safe. And we wish you well in a real retirement this time. And if your husband kicks you out again, let us know. We'll find a job for you. All right, thank you. I'll turn it back over to Ed.
Thank you, Rush. And Sandra, again, thank you for your service, and thank you for coming this evening. Before we call it off for the night, want to thank the Bungalow Restaurant for providing the food we had here before the program tonight, and Jim Walker, he happened to stick around tonight. Jim, stand up. He always provides great food before our meeting every time we have a program, so thank you, Jim. We're going to be dark next month in August. However, September, our meeting's going to be our candidates forum. All the city council candidates will be here, so be sure and join us for that, and we'll see you next time.